I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
Wisconsin State Senator Bob Jauch joins us tonight to talk about his decision not to run for re-election. The longtime senator says democracy is on life support in Madison.
Well, it's election season, and newspapers are filled with letters supporting one candidate or another. This week, the Duluth News Tribune exposed what might be a common political strategy: ghost-written letters to the editor.
And we'll have the week's business headlines and a news file story from 25 years ago.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching tonight. Julie, November is here and the days are getting noticeably shorter.
But the nights are also getting noticeably longer, and
yes.
As someone who likes to hibernate, I'm okay with that.
We're right in the middle of fall, are we not? All right.
We are.
Well, we've got some great topics tonight, so let's get going.
All right. Thank you, Danny, and welcome, everyone. Last month, the man who has been representing northwestern Wisconsin in the state legislature for more than 3 decades announced he would not seek re-election next year. That's not surprising, considering the lawmaker estimates he has traveled nearly 750,000 miles during his time in office. Wisconsin State Senator Bob Jauch joins us now to talk about his decision to retire at the end of 2014. And Senator, thanks for being here.
Wonderful to be with you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any one decision or any one factor that weighed more heavily in this decision?
That's 1,000 paper cuts. I think a combination of things. Clearly, knowing that I'm at 68, I'll be 69 next year, and this isn't a 4-month decision, it's a 5-year decision. When you commit to running for office, you're running for a 4-year term next year. I'd be serving until January of 2019. And I concluded that given the mileage I've put in, given the nature, the state of politics, which is in so disarray, the size of this district, that I didn't think I could maintain the level of commitment, the standard of quality representation that I've tried to maintain for 31 years for the next 5 years. And so I concluded I didn't have another 125,000 miles in my tank.
Senator, you said democracy is on life support. What do you mean by that?
Well, politics just isn't the way it used to be. The middle has been lost. Moderation has been suffocated by the extremes on both sides.
The art of give and take?
Oh, compromise is a 4-letter word to politicians who want to win at any cost. It's my way or the highway. We saw it in Washington. Politics in Madison is very much the same way, where there's no interest in looking for the best ideas to better the state, but rather either seek failure to try to win an election or insist on one point of view, regardless of whether or not there are adverse consequences to that.
Mm-hmm. Talk about how things were different when you went to Madison. Was it a completely different political climate back then?
Oh,
maybe you wouldn't have stayed for 30 years.
It was much different, where first of all, legislators got to know each other as friends. They knew about their families. They could talk to each other as human beings, not adversaries. And today, Republicans are criticized for talking to Democrats and vice versa. Staff don't get along with each other. And what makes the political process work is trust. You have to be able to sit across the table and communicate without playing games so that you know what the bottom line is. You want to be able to find solutions. I've spent my entire career looking for solutions. That happens to be the way people in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin live their lives.
Which brings up the question, Bob, your biggest legislative accomplishment.
Well, I would hope that it is making sure that northern Wisconsin and citizens are treated more as equals and that they're more part of the process. But as I look back, I would say that it is adopting an aging schools initiative, reaching a compromise with Governor Thompson where we modernized our aging schools in Wisconsin, invested hundreds of millions of dollars to update those schools, and new schools are being built constantly at less cost to taxpayers as a result.
And your biggest disappointment?
The failure of the institution, the failure of my colleagues to think of the best interest of all citizens. I understand the need to fight for principle, but don't insist on principle if it means that we can't find the common good for all citizens. I'm terribly disappointed with the political climate where you have an individual like Dale Schultz, who is a moderate Republican, an Eisenhower Republican, a Knowles Republican, very proud to be a Republican, but he votes Republican 99% of the time, and he has a primary against him where $90,000 has been raised simply because he has taken a point of view on the mining bill, on the Act 10, where he tried to find good solutions. In politics today, they try to punish your enemy rather than better the state, and I think that means our democracy is at risk because money plays such a terrible role in the eventual outcome.
Any political battles that in hindsight you wish you had not engaged in, or legislation that you opposed at one point that maybe afterwards didn't turn out to be quite as bad as you thought it was going to be?
No, I've been asked that question. I don't. I think every fight I've gotten myself into, and which has been the major fights in Wisconsin, going back to Indian spearfishing, now the volatile mining issue for the last 3 years, I've tried to take a position not on what is black or right, but black and white, but what is good and right. And if you point your compass in the right direction, try to understand the facts, listen carefully to reasoned points of view, you can find good decisions, good results that are in the best interest of all of us. That's the way politics has always served this country well. And that's the way I've tried to serve in the legislature. So I can't think of too many regrets. I've taken tough positions. I haven't tried to run because I was worried about my own political hide. I wanted to do what was good and right.
Senator, you still have a year in office.
Yeah.
What do you want to see accomplished in the next 12 months?
Well, hopefully I can set a standard for good government. Senator Tim Cullen, a colleague of mine, announced he was retiring. And I think both of us agree that we want to try to talk about the legislative institution. We want to encourage our younger colleagues to understand that it doesn't have to be this way. And it wasn't too long ago, people got along and we respected each other.
But is there anything you still wanted to bring to your district?
Well, we're working on the synthetic marijuana bill next Tuesday, as a matter of fact. It's been such a hot topic here in Duluth and the Twin Ports. It's very important over in Ashland, and we have a bill that we've been working on for the last year, a bipartisan bill, I might add, with the Attorney General that we think will give law enforcement the kind of tools they need to maybe shut that facility down and stem the tide. There are a few other items that matter to local communities, and those bills are in the hopper as well.
You talk about how time-consuming it has been to hold state office, and how this has really compromised relationships, in your family. You have to put them second sometimes because the work comes first. Is that true, do you think, for most people, or do you think that your level of commitment is unique?
Well, I think in this business, the public has ownership and the family has visitation rights. I mean, as public servants, when we're out in the grocery store or in the restaurant or at the gas station, people are going to come up and say, "Sorry to bother you, but I've been meaning to talk with you," and they're not rude at all. We serve them. They call on weekends. Clearly, I think my commitment in Madison has been very difficult for my wife because I've been away more than I've been home. And she's been a terrific supporter. And as I've told her, maybe I can shovel the walk when there's a snowstorm from now on.
You mentioned the mining controversy, Bob. What's been learned in this issue?
I think that history will be a better judge of what's been learned. I would hope that people would step back and realize that these are complicated issues, and it's been treated in such a simple fashion that somehow changing the regulatory process because of jobs should be easy. It shouldn't be easy to dig a 1,000-foot hole at the headwaters of the Bad River watershed. This is complicated stuff, and wetlands and water, and our quality of life is at risk. And the process should be fair and reasonable, but at the same time you shouldn't expedite it simply for the sake of getting it done. Because a mistake in a resource like that could be catastrophic. So I think the biggest mistake has been trying to rush this thing through rather than talking about the complicated issues. This company has not gotten its bulk sampling permits, even though they submitted them months ago. I think because they were paying too much attention to the politics and deregulation and not enough to the resource.
So you've got just over a year left. Then what? Have you decided what you're going to do in retirement besides snow shoveling, or are you going to stay active at some level in politics or the community?
Well, I'm not going to lobby, that's for one thing. But I'm going to spend some time on civic education. I think that if anything in this country, we need to realize our citizenship responsibilities to make for a better community and a stronger democracy. And that the most important day isn't just election day, it's every day where we can influence the outcome. So I'm going to encourage people to take an active role in understanding their government and trying to make a difference, not just on the hot button issues, but on the day-to-day issues. We are too inflamed and enraged society, and we need to be an informed and engaged society where we're looking at the facts and less of the emotion to try to find that common ground. So I'll spend some time on civic education, encouraging young people to understand the institution of government, not from a Republican or Democratic point of view, but from a democracy point of view.
And you can probably have some good advice to whoever follows in your footsteps.
Well, I hope so.
I imagine. Thank you so much, Senator, for
Thank
coming
you,
in
Senator.
and for all the work that you've done over the years.
Thank you both.
Let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
Far North may have bombed earlier this month with New York critics, but its Midwestern premiere promises to be a smash, partly because the Duluth audience will be looking at it differently.
The real highlight of this film for Duluthians is that Duluth and the surrounding countryside is featured so prevalently through the entire feature, which is really unusual. It's one thing to do a motion picture in an area, it's another thing to do a motion picture about an area, and I think that's what's going to make this a great evening.
Crews were hard at work today preparing for the Hollywood-style premiere, setting up tables, hauling in glassware, and keeping the traditional movie snacks well stocked. By 7 o'clock, you will hardly be able to recognize the Miller Hill Mall Theater. Director Sam Shepard and Jessica Lange will not be attending tonight's gala event, but other stars will. Actor Charles Durning was also happy to make the trip back.
When you're treated as well as we've been treated in this town, you want to come back. The people are encouraging and polite and giving and helpful as they can be.
All 750 seats have been sold out at $25 apiece, and the limo should start pulling up around 7. Duluth may not be Hollywood, but tonight, it's the next best thing. Julie Zenner, KDLH News.
Open up the Duluth News Tribune this close to Election Day and you'll find it filled with letters to the editor advocating for one candidate or another. Now, each of these letters is supposed to be signed by the letter writer, and that writer is verified by the newspaper's editorial staff. But this week, the News Tribune exposed what could be a common practice, a letter that wasn't written by the person who signed it. And that got us thinking about the role of the editorial page in elections and the reliability of submitted letters and their writers. So, joining us now is Chuck Frederick, Duluth News Tribune editorial page editor, and Jim Heffernan, now retired, spent more than 20 years on the editorial page at the News Tribune. Chuck, how surprised were you when you discovered this ruse?
Probably more surprised that we discovered it. I suspect that it happens a lot more often than we ever pick up on. I've been told it happens a lot. I've been told it's very common. You go to rallies, political meetings, and letters are handed out for people to sign and send in. We don't want people to do that. We want people to actually write their own letters. And when we catch it, when we notice something like that happen, we take it very seriously.
So how did you catch it?
The letter writer included or forgot to delete at the bottom of her email an email exchange that she had with the person who actually wrote it, and asked her to send it in, and told her, if you want to change it, go ahead. If you want to leave it as is, go ahead. And she said, I'll leave it as is. And he said, great, thanks. And it was, she forgot to delete that.
Jim, is this a practice that's been going on for a long time?
It has, and we dealt with it, every election for forever. But it's to back up what Chuck was saying, it's an honor system.
Yeah.
And if people are willing to lie to you, or at the outset, if somebody asks them to put their name on something that they didn't write, and then get a call and lie, well, then it's an easy system to scam. And this is advice to somebody who isn't honest about it and wants to scam it. We both knew that.
Why is it so important that the person writes the letter themselves? If they look at the message that the candidate wants them to share and they agree with it point for point, isn't their signature really just an endorsement?
I think it's a matter of integrity and a matter of truthfulness and honesty. I think when readers, it's about the readers. When readers read the newspaper, they need to be able to trust that what they're reading is real and it's authentic, and it's not what we in the industry call the astroturf or turf, meaning fake. We want to present authentic content, and I think the most disappointing part, like Jim was getting at, is when people do lie to you. It's just straight to you. It's just completely baffles me how some people can do that just so casually, and then repeatedly in this case.
So when people write a letter to the editor of the Duluth News Tribune, you can both chat about this. Do you verify that the letter? Do you call them all the time? They're always called.
I think we use the same system we've always used. We pick up the telephone and we give them a call, and the standard questions.
We didn't always. When I started doing that around 1980, we just took them
at their word.
Yeah. And a lot of papers do.
But then there were times that we really got scammed, and people using signing names that
didn't exist.
Don't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then we started calling.
Would this be an issue if that same email exchange had simply provided a bullet list of points that the candidate wanted to get across?
Well, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with, if I'm a candidate and I ask someone, hey, would you write a letter to the editor making some of these points? At least then the person who agrees to do it is sitting down and giving thought to those points, putting them in their own words, and making the letter their own. So then it's actually their letter. Yeah. It's not just I'm signing my name to this. Sometimes we'll get some where it's pretty clear that's what's happened. You'll call them with a question because the sentence doesn't make sense. They won't have any idea what you're talking about. So it can be very frustrating.
In a case like this, is the letter writer now barred from ever submitting another letter to the editor?
Yes.
I think we've always done it that way.
Yes.
It should be brought up here, though, that I think if you see what we call point of view columns, op-ed columns by, say, the governor or one of the senators, U.S. senators from Minnesota, the chances that they actually wrote that are like nil, 0 to nil. Like Obama isn't writing his speeches. This is pretty much the same thing. And I don't know, we just take that for granted that people understand that. It's under their name, but they don't.
But you don't see a problem with that practice
there's
versus
a jump there.
What's the difference?
Well, they're being honest. It's what they wanted to send. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
As far as I know, they write it. You ask them if they write it, they write it.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, this is for both of you. What is the role of the editorial page, generally and during an election?
I've always thought of the opinion page as a community talking to itself and sharing ideas and sharing opinions and sharing thoughts, and together with lots and lots of different thoughts and ideas and opinions and viewpoints, we come up with some of the best ideas as a community. It's a forum for that. It's a forum for those critical community conversations we have to have. I know I kind of sound maybe old school with that, but I take that very seriously, and I really feel that we play an important community role by providing that forum for legitimate conversation.
I might add that some people, quite a few people, don't think the paper should endorse candidates. don't tell me how to vote, they say. Well, the paper isn't telling them how to vote, but the paper is interviewing everybody that they write about, and they're kind of introducing them to the community and telling them what they think of them.
Jim, you're older than Chuck. I'm not saying you're old.
Yes,
but,
I am older.
Years ago, too, it was the editorial page always still back in those days the same purpose as it is for today, a community forum.
The purpose, but it wasn't nearly as active back, 30, 40 years ago. I remember when I started working at the News Tribune in the 60s, the editorial page editor coming up to me and saying, "Can you think of a letter to write for?" You get about 2 letters a week in those days, and now look at it was very different.
We get plenty. Let me go back to the endorsement thing just really quickly. We used to when I started in the opinion page. I was a reporter for 20 years, and I switched over several. Well, when Jim retired, I took over for him. But we used to run our endorsements like right before the election, And then when I realized, we're not giving anyone else a chance to comment on what we think then. So now we try to do our endorsements early to kind of start the conversation. We don't want to be the last word necessarily, but you talk about don't tell me who to vote for. Well, like Jim said, we're not telling you who to vote for, but we want to start a conversation. Let's talk about who the candidates are and what we think are the good points and what we think are maybe not such great points. So,
some people have a perception, when there are these endorsements, that the paper's news department is biased. But you're really very separate from the news department, right?
Yes.
How do you maintain that separation?
Well, I'm in my own room all by myself. It's lonely.
No one talks to you.
Nobody talks to me.
Lonely at
No,
the top.
I go out. The newsroom is right there, but we do definitely maintain that separation. A lot of our information. I'm a one-person editorial department. Jim was a two-person. We can't do all the reporting that our newsroom can do, so we do rely on a lot of the reporting. But we do a lot of original reporting too. We're constantly picking up the phone and making phone calls and going to events and things like that. So that separation is definitely important. I think most people kind of see it or kind of get it.
Do you edit letters to the editor?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
We edit for a lot of reasons.
Huge task.
For grammar,
Huge
for style,
everything.
for clarity, for brevity.
But
There's a lot of
never
different
to
reasons.
change anybody's meaning.
Well, you try not to. Every once in a while, you get
It
accused
happens.
of that.
Yeah.
We
Do
sure
you
try not
when
to.
you call and you make your initial contact, do you ask them, is it okay if we put it this way, or do you not do that? That's up to your discretion.
Not with letters. I with now with email columns, local view columns. I'll usually email back to the original writer, and so they have a final look at it before it goes in. But with letters, we get so many letters. There's no way we'd have time to do that.
Sure.
With the internet now and so many message boards for people to vent on anonymously, has that changed the character of the letters that you receive? Are they the more serious or more thoughtful? What do you see?
I think you see a lack of civility on a lot of those message boards when people are allowed to rant anonymously. The nastiness and the venom that gets spewed, we don't tolerate in the print, and we never have.
No.
We don't allow name calling. We don't allow uncivil sort of tones. In fact, we'll change. You talk about editing letters. We'll change letters rather than talking about a previous letter writer. We make sure that the letters are talking about the issue in the previous letter. So instead of Joe White said this, it's the letter on September 17th said this.
Yeah.
So we try to keep it. We try to not to let it get personal.
Could message boards be a thing of the past if it continues to get nasty?
People seem to love them.
Oh, all right, okay.
Who doesn't love posting their thoughts?
Well, Jim, you're still posting your thoughts. You're no longer working for the newspaper, but you're blogging.
I
and
do have a
keeping
blog,
busy.
yes, and it's not quite as active as perhaps it should be, but
What's a blog?
I do it.
What about the future of the editorial page? Because, as newspapers have struggled and the advertising dollars have kind of started to dry up, that's a page that doesn't have ads on it.
That's right.
Does that make it vulnerable?
Well, I think I'm blessed, or our community is blessed that we have a publisher and an ownership company that sees the value in the opinion page. They see the community service and that we provide, and they also see the readership that it generates. I mean, how many letters to the editor do we have? There are 3 full pages of nothing but people are engaged in this community, which is a wonderful thing, and they also see the value of having a voice in the newspaper. So driving the readership generates the advertising and circulation and all those things.
And do you think that those letters actually influence the outcome of elections?
Well, you take that one.
I have my doubts. I really do. You see a headline Well, you know, I'm for this one and
Yes.
that
Yeah.
one. Personally, I don't keep reading then. I just go on with something else.
And that's why a couple of years ago, the letters that endorse specific candidates, we've required those to be a lot shorter
Yeah,
than
that's
we
a good
used to.
idea, yeah.
And we have to go on to Chuck. Jim, thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
you
you.
coming in.
Welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Let's turn now to the week's top business stories from Business North. Minnesota Power officials broke ground Thursday for a major construction project that will reduce emissions at its largest coal-fired generator. The utility says those improvements will reduce emissions of mercury about 90% at the Boswell plant in Cohasset, along with the levels of particulates and sulfur. Minnesota Power's portion of the project is estimated to cost some $350 million. When the work is complete, Minnesota Power will have invested approximately $700 million in cleaner energy compared with 2005 levels, according to CEO Al Hodnick.
The Duluth Airport Authority this week celebrated the completion of 3 additional jet passenger bridges. Now, all 4 jet bridges at the new terminal are fully operational and ready for service for commercial and charter flights. The initial groundbreaking for the airport project took place in September of 2009, and the new terminal opened for business in January of this year. The completion of the 4 jet bridges marks the end of Phase 3 for the terminal construction project.
The plan to build a new office tower in downtown Duluth has been scaled back slightly. The new building will stand 10 to 12 stories high, down from the original 15-story plan. Construction is now expected to be completed by December 2015, according to developers. The original plan was to create space for Maurice's, plus build 2 additional floors for other businesses that were adding new jobs. But Brian Forcier of the Atwater Group said that plan would have created additional vacancies by shifting tenants from other downtown office space. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment on our show, now's the time to call. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. And don't forget to visit the WDSE website, where you can get the latest program updates, news about your favorite PBS shows, and information about our station. Well, Julie, it's time to fall back this weekend.
That's right. You change your clocks this weekend at 2 o'clock on Sunday.
2 o'clock Sunday morning, daylight
That's right.
saving time comes to an
Daylight
end.
savings end.
Thank you. For Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend, everybody, and be kind.